Hey, it's Cadet Rob 1985, and today we're going to be talking about U.S. military medals and awards. So, you've probably seen many of the charts of military medals by their order of precedence. In other words, which one goes higher on the stack of ribbons that a person puts on their uniform. And so, the highest one would be, the Congressional Medal of Honor, going on down to the Navy pistol marksman shots at the bottom. But what I wanted to show today was actually the order in which the U.S. military medals and awards were created, because I think it shows some interesting things. So let's go ahead and go through them. So the oldest military award is the Army Certificate of Merit Medal. It goes back to 1846. And it's just a simple red, white, and blue ribbon. And then the second oldest, of course, is the Congressional Medal of Honor during the Civil War in 1861. And it's represented as a ribbon by a blue ribbon with white stars. From there, we go to 1869, after the Civil War, where both the Navy and the Marine Corps created their Good Conduct Medals. And the Coast Guard, which at that time wasn't called the Coast Guard, but the Coast Guard created their gold and silver life-saving medals. But you notice the medals at the beginning are very simple, just one or two colors, maybe with white. The Good Conduct Medal in the Navy and Marine Corps Specialty Meritorious Service Medal, or just one single color on the ribbon. And then in 1917, they had the Army Wound Ribbon, which is later on replaced by the Purple Heart. First by Wound Stripes, and then later on by the Purple Heart. And then you have one of the next ones that's still around today is the Distinguished Service Cross in 1918. And also the Distinguished Service Medal. So as World War I comes along, you notice there's no medals really between the Civil War and World War I. So no medals during the time of any of the conflicts that happened after the Civil War, like the Spanish-American War. So the next one is the Silver Star in 1918. And 1919, the Navy Cross and the Navy and Marine Expeditionary Medals. And in 1920, the Marksmanship ribbons for both the Navy and the Coast Guard, which by this time is the Coast Guard. Then the Strange Medal in 1921, the Marine Corps Brevet Medal, which was for officers who had been breveted, which is very interesting. Breveting was a practice of promoting outside of the normal. It was very common in the Civil War and kind of goes out of fashion by World War I. By that time, then what you started seeing was, instead of breveting, you had officers being promoted into a reserve grade or a temporary grade versus their permanent regular Army grade. So then you have the select Marine Corps Reserve medals. Throughout the 1920s, you'll see some more medals come online. The Distinguished Flying Cross, Soldier's Medal, the Purple Heart in 1930. The Naval Academy Pistol Practice Medal, the Navy Expeditionary Medal, the Naval Reserve Medal. And then as World War II comes on, you're going to see an explosion of new medals. The Army Commendation Medal. The Army finally comes along with its own Good Conduct Medal. And a Good Conduct Medal for the Coast Guard. The Navy Distinguished Marksman Ribbon, the Legion of Merit, the Navy Marine Corps Medal, the Air Medal. An interesting one called the Typhus Commission Medal. The Navy and Marine Corps Commendation, the Army Women's Corps, the WACS Service Medal, Merchant Marine Distinguished Service Medal, the Mariner's Medal, the Merchant Marine Combat Bar, the Bronze Star, the Meritorious Service Medal for the Merchant Marines, and the Merchant Marines Defense Bar. You can see there's a lot of Merchant Marine medals during this time because they are seeing a lot of service, ferrying goods to Europe. The Marine Corps Reserve Ribbon, the Inter-American Defense Board Service Medal. And then going on after the war, the Coast Guard Commendation Medal, Coast Guard Distinguished Service. So as the Coast Guard becomes its own more fully formed service in the 1940s, it gets its own bunch of medals. The Coast Guard Medal, which you might notice looks a lot like the Army Soldier Medal, which there's the Soldier's Medal. Very similar. And you'll notice the Commendation Medals are all look very similar. Green and white, green and white. And then into the 1950s, the Armed Forces Reserve Medal, the Vietnam Gallantry Cross Medal. The Navy has their marksmanship medals. And then 1957, you're going to see a series of Air Force medals because the Air Force becomes its own service. So the Longevity Ribbon, Commendation, Air Force Cross, Air Force Distinguished Service, and the Airman's Medal, which also looks like the Soldier's Medal and the Coast Guard Medal. Very special Four Chaplains Medal, which only awarded to 4 people. And then you're going to see the Achievement and Commendation Medals come online in the 60s. The Navy and Marine Corps Achievements Medal. And then down here you have the Joint Service Commendation Medal and the Coast Guard Achievement Medal, which basically very similar to the Navy Medal. And then President's Freedom Medals in 1963. The Air Force finally comes up with its own Good Conduct Medal. Up until then, they're basically using the Army's Good Conduct Medal. The Coast Guard Reserve Good Conduct Medal. Air Force Reserve Meritorious Medal. And then as you get down here, they are less medals and more ribbons. Although there's still a few medals, like the Meritorious Service Medal. And they also get a lot more colorful, with many more stripes. And some interesting ones in here. The Defense Awards, right? So in 1970, the Defense Distinguished Service Medal, the Defense Superior Service Medal in 1976, and 77, the Defense Meritorious Service Medal. So a whole series of Department of Defense awards here in the 1970s. And more Air Force awards. And in the 1980s, you start seeing deployment awards, such as the Navy and Marine Corps Sea Service Deployment Award, the Army Service Ribbon in 81, training awards, and then now the Army Achievement Medal, the Air Force Achievement Medal in 81, the Army Service Ribbon, the Army Overseas Service Ribbon, Joint Service Achievement Medal, and then some more Coast Guard into the 1980s. The Coast Guard Sea Service, Restricted Duty, and the Training Graduate Ribbons. Prisoner of War Medal in 1985. Then the Transportation Department Awards in the 90s here. And a few more as we go forward into the 2000s. You start seeing some smaller awards, but then also some other ones, such as the Air Force Combat Action Ribbon in 2007. So we start getting into the War on Terror, and Coast Guard Combat Action Ribbon, Coast Guard Cross, Coast Guard Overseas Service Ribbon, the Marine Corps Combat Instructor Ribbon, and the Air Force Special Duty Ribbon. So 2015 is our last new award, was the Navy Recruit Honor Graduate Ribbon. So I think it's interesting to go through these and to see just, some evolution way back at the beginning. Very simple patterns. The patterns get a little more complicated. You also see ribbons that kind of, honor other ribbons, such as you can see that the two good conduct medals kind of honor each other, which go back to these original ones of the Navy and the Marines. As you go forward, the Bronze Star, you can kind of see similar to the Silver Star. The different soldiers and airmen's medals kind of have that similar pattern to them. The Air Force Cross has, is kind of like a paler blue version of the Army Distinguished Service Cross. And then all of the commendation and achievement medals with the green all throughout them, even going into the 80s where you see more of the same there. And then the defense medals with their kinds of purplish backgrounds, purple and white. And then the transportation ones with their orange and blue. So you do see that. And this one is one of the most interesting ones to me. In 2007, the Air Force Combat Action Medal, because it to me it looks much more like a British medal, very similar to some British medals, and not like any of the American ones. All right, so this one's gone on long enough. I'm Cadet Rob, 1985, and if you like this video, please like and hit the bell for updates, and recommend it to others. Do all those good things that you need to do.